Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday night. It's our time to talk about telling your story. A few things we want to announce. First of all, baptism, so important. It's a time of a public profession of your faith. We want to make sure that you visit in ourfamily.church. You can actually go to baptism.ourfamily.church, and you'll have the opportunity to sign up if you haven't done it. We're so happy that we finally have a chance to do it. We're going to be meeting together on a Saturday, and on that Saturday, we'll be able to have family out there and everyone. We'll record it to make sure that everyone sees it. Please join us for that. Also, our students are getting back together. They are so excited to be out of the house and have something to look forward to. We got tribes every Wednesday, June 24th to July 22nd. Go to our student page to sign up for that. Well, right now I'm just going to ask you to share and hit that share button and invite somebody to be a part of this. We have a couple stories here that are just amazing how God was able to work and is working in their lives. We call this Tell Your Story because we think it's important that everyone knows the story that God has written for their life and that they're able to communicate it to tell other people of what they're going through. There's a couple verses I want to point out. First of all, the first one's in Psalm 107. It says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Those he redeemed from the hand of the foe, those he gathered from the lands, from east and west, from north to south." So if you've been redeemed, it means you've been saved, you've been pulled out of something, and that you're now the property of the Lord, and you have a story. There's also 2 Corinthians, and it tells you in chapter 3, verse 3, "You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts." We all have a story to tell. And it's important to understand how a story works. As a writer, I'm surrounded by stories all the time. But every story has a beginning, a middle, and the end. The beginning is what your life was like before Christ. The middle, what happened when you met Christ. And at the end is what your life is like with Christ. And so we have some people here today that definitely can exemplify that story, that know all about how God has worked in their lives. First of all, we have Nelson and Marcy Bonnet. And the two of you have been coming to this church, do you remember how long?
10 years.
10 years, let's say 10 years. Okay, that sounds pretty good.
Let's go
You
with
agree
that.
with that?
That's about right.
10, good, all right. But Nelson, when you first sort of realized who Christ was, it was important, you said 8. What was happening around that time?
I went to a Christian school, learned a little bit about God at the time. I was in 5th grade, so about 8 years old when I got to know who he was. Some things didn't quite click at the time, so there was a little bit of period in my life where I went from, just navigating my faith, if you will, until I found out where I was supposed to be, and ultimately when I realized what God wanted me to be and how I needed to come to him. It was after high school, I would say, is when that finally sunk in.
So you got some information at first, but you got more complete information
Certainly,
about
yeah.
who Christ was and what you needed to do in your life. Is that all in Puerto Rico?
In Puerto Rico, no. The beginning of it, yes. I did finish high school here, though.
Okay.
So it was after I was here in the U.S. that I found, who God meant for me to be.
Great. And then at some point in there, you meet Marcy. Now, Marcy is a local, Gotha.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yes.
it's like right over there. I live right near it. You were telling me about what life was like before Yellow Dog Eats. Wow, I mean, you go way back
Way
in
back.
some of those things. But for you, it was 5 years old. And what was going on in your life that you had an understanding of who Jesus was?
It was hearing the plan of salvation, of how Jesus died on the cross for my sins. And that just resonated so much, that specific time in chapel, that I heard it and I knew without a doubt I was a sinner, and I for sure didn't want to go to hell. I wanted to spend eternity with Jesus, who had died for my sins and who wanted to have that relationship with me. And the simplicity of that, it wasn't about me, it was simply receiving the gift that he had already given, was there just wasn't a doubt that's what I wanted.
Wow. I mean, at 5, It's amazing, just how powerful that message is. That at 5 years old, you really understood that. And that's really kept you on the straight path your whole life. And good for you, because many of us have mistakes and failures of, enormous kind. But you had that knowledge at such an early age. I mean, both of you did. And all of it was to prepare you for life together. So you guys first meet in 1997, and where were you working?
We both worked at Wet and Wild. We were both lifeguards there.
Wet and Wild, okay. And so you see each other, you go out on your first date, and what does Nelson say to you on the first date?
He says, "Hello, I love you. We're going to get married and spend the rest of our life together."
How do you know that? How do you know that for sure?
Gift of prophecy, I suppose.
Oh, okay, all right. You might have your own show here, Gift of Prophecy, if you want to later. So you get married in, what was it, 2000?
2000.
2000, okay. So he was right.
He
Has
was
he been right about everything since?
absolutely.
So we get three wonderful girls, Caitlin, Madison, Alexandra, and they enter your life and, of course, bring so much joy. You work at AT&T.
Correct.
Worked there for a while. You worked at Marriott for a long period of time after the Wet and Wild bathing suit thing was
Yes.
all over with. And then something begins to happen in your life. Tell us about 2013.
2013, I awoke in the night, realized that, well, I didn't realize at the time. I went to the doctor because there were some unusual things that had occurred. They ordered a plethora of tests and exams to figure out what was going on. I was positive it was not needed,
Nothing.
that everything was fine. I was perfectly healthy. There's no reason.
So the setup for it, though,
For
is
concern.
you wake up, right? So you wake up on the floor one night. Right?
Yes.
And that's unusual.
I don't typically sleep on the
Don't
floor, correct?
traditionally do that. So you wake up and they begin to do some exams. And at first they say,
Well, they did an MRI, and that came back that there was a mass on my brain.
okay,
And at that point, it was very preliminary. They didn't know. There was no other testing done at that time to know if it was rapidly growing, if there were weeks, a couple months maybe, that we'd have left together with the children and our lives, or not.
yeah.
It just, there was a lot of unknowns, certainly, in the initial, other than there was a mass. We don't know if it's slow growing, aggressive. That's all we know.
So they eventually realize they have to go in and do surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they go in to do surgery, what do they understand that this is?
During surgery, half of my right temporal lobe needed to be removed where the mass was more concentrated, as much as they could remove with me still being able to function, and speech, just
Right.
in general, vision, with where the mass, the tumor is.
Right. So this is, what did they diagnose of what type of cancer it is?
It's a oleodendroglioma is the name of the tumor, the cancer.
Okay.
It's been slow growing so far. That can change. We don't know, so it's just monitoring every 3 months. I have MRIs to look for any changes that at some point will be significant enough to take the next step of action, whatever treatment that is at that time.
So, Nelson, you're watching your beloved going through all this. As someone that has a wife who went through cancer, not easy to watch
No.
her sort of get beat up by all these sort of things. What's going through your mind? What's sustaining you? You got 3 girls at this time also you're dealing with.
The thought of certainly our children being so young at the time it happened, but then there's also the thoughts of my father. My father passed away as well from a brain tumor. So immediately when we got the first diagnosis, I was able to kind of take a step back because of having the background to say, one set of pictures, one set of MRI doesn't really tell the whole story, right? Because we don't know how fast it's growing, if it's growing. There was a lot of, to the point she made, there was a lot of unknowns that until we got that second scan, then we can truly start kind of gauging what was going on. But certainly, I mean, it was a struggle. I remember I came here and I spoke with you, and actually I spoke with Pastor Chuck as well, thinking of that calmness and that peace of God, and knowing that for myself, I knew where my wife was at. I knew where our faith was, rock solid. But I remember coming to you guys and saying, I may need help explaining this to my young children. Because that's the part, I guess, that I felt
Right.
a little bit unprepared for. As far as her faith and my faith, not a question there,
Right.
but it was more that piece of it. So, got
So
some guidance from you guys, certainly.
What did you find was the best tactic? Was it honesty, or was there a careful release of information?
They were 5, 3, and 2 at the time. So their understanding of the word cancer didn't have as much negative connotation as what it may for a 20-year-old finding out. And again, I just feel like that's God's perfect timing of how he intentionally prepared us all along the way. And for them also, in their young lives, they don't really remember a mommy pre-surgery. They know me as I am now. And that's just always been the way it is. So
It's always been their normal.
Yeah.
I think
right.
it was, you told them, and then they came in separate from me. And I remember then you came in the room and we just all kneeled down and prayed together and thanked God for what we knew he was going to do as he carried us through this, even though we had no idea what that was going to look like. There was just always such a peace that he loves my children more than I ever could. So who am I to fear for them when I know he gave them to me? He's more than capable of sustaining them with or without me. It's not about me. So just having that peace and being able to talk to them about it, that our lives are temporary, but God's eternal, and that's what matters in your life.
And I think people would look at your situation and say, oh, she's dying. There's no cure, right, for this that we know of right now. Jesus can cure it. But right now, people would say, Marcy's dying, but the truth is we're all dying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could leave here and die before you in a car wreck on Main Street. But, so we really don't know what our expiration date is. You've just had a little bit more of a wake-up call that this could happen in your life than, say, most people do.
Yeah, such a gift. I think I know the Bible says very clearly that our days, they were counted from the beginning of time.
Right.
So that didn't change just because
Of your diagnosis.
my diagnosis, my perception of life and what that would look like
Right.
didn't change that by a
didn't
minute.
go,
So,
"Oh, no,
and
I
we're
didn't
very clearly directed by God not to worry about it. So it's,
So and right now, what is the effect on your family? Your kids are much older. You got, what, high school?
No,
Middle
not yet.
school?
Middle school.
Middle school, okay. In middle school, how has it sort of changed your dynamic? I mean, do you find, how are the kids reacting to this?
I would say they're very understanding. They're very empathetic, certainly. When they realize that there are things that are causing us stress, be it mental stress
Right.
primarily. Our children, again, it's been a blessing because they understand it. They know how to help out where they
Right,
can.
right.
Even a simple thing of maybe we're just making too much noise around the house, and today just needs to be more of a quiet day.
Right.
Even the little things, but they're very in tune to what our family needs.
That's great. And more of a maturity towards some of these things, life or death, and being aware of how they can help each other. So as you called it a gift, that's the best way to look at it this time, instead of a
Absolutely.
curse, right?
Oh,
You see it as
definitely
a
not.
gift. Well, that's an amazing story, and we're going to continue to pray and monitor your situation and support you guys, and just appreciate all that you do for our church.
Thank you. We appreciate the church and our family, our church family here. And again, that's just God's timing of who he put in place in our life to support and walk down this
Pray for us.
journey with us. We weren't at it alone and never felt like we were.
Well, you're here for a reason. We appreciate it. Thank you for your story. Next up, we have Don and Bee Schaffhauser. Don and Bee, again, longtime members, been here for a little while. And Don is from New Jersey and has sung in our choir many times. Bee from Massachusetts. Bee serves with our students and is a teacher over there, so God bless her. You guys were married in 1981, but you had met down here in Florida. And what were you doing at the time when you guys met?
Well, I was working for the Catholic Church, both as a music instructor and music director for the church.
Uh-huh.
And in the summers, I drove the bus for their summer camp program.
Oh,
So one summer, Bee was a student counselor.
not a student.
Not
Let's
a
be
student.
clear
no,
about
she
that.
she was a student counselor.
Student counselor. So,
I was a driver, and that's how we first met.
Okay. So a summer camp romance kind of thing, or
Nah,
Not really.
just like you see in all the movies?
No.
Nothing like that? Okay. You were a little too young. You had to grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. So when you're at a Catholic church, so you're around sort of religious kind of things,
Yes, I had a
And-
good solid foundation in my faith there.
right?
But it was all, the head thing. You've heard that. I knew everything that I needed to know, but I didn't have all of the knowledge in my heart, and that's where
So who helped you to do that?
a Baptist girl.
A Baptist girl.
Yes,
You were dating her.
yes, I
They're
was.
dangerous. You got to just be careful with these Baptist girls. But she's sort of introducing something that you're now understanding. But that full understanding of surrender to your life started with her, but where was it really completed?
Where was it going from there?
Yeah, you went
say?
to that independent church, remember?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Went after we broke up. I went to an independent church, and that's where I started to get into the classes and really understand the whole thing that I had a foundation on in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you understood fully what that meant to what Christ was about. And you were singing in some of his productions and everything.
Exactly.
And then the awareness of who Christ was came during what?
Right. I actually was the first time that we presented the musical, and I remember looking out at people's faces and singing, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, you are the Christ." And really, at that time, my mind said, "Do you really believe that?"
Wow.
There was a paradigm shift, and I think at that point my heart softened, and it was a slow understanding from there, learning over probably the next year or so what a relationship with Christ was all about, changing my life based on my love for Christ and wanting to be obedient to his word.
So you're on stage singing, and this is all coming to a realization.
Right.
And what is this play, this amazing play that speaks the truth?
Oh, it was an old musical from the
Jimmy and Carol Owens.
Jimmy and Carol Owens, The Witness,
The
from
Witness.
the 70s. Yes,
Wow. Okay. So you guys did that for a long time?
we did. We did it. We
Almost
did about
20
once a
years.
month for about 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, and it was primarily Catholic audiences. They were thirsting
Yeah.
for the truth.
But you're saying that people were really responding too, not
Yes.
just you, right?
Yes.
That's amazing. All right. I'll have to look out for that. Maybe it's going to play around here at some point. So your background, music, choirs. I know sometimes you get called when somebody needs a choir here at the Amway Center. I know you jump in for some of those things. So that's your background. But also you got involved with working with the airlines?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And it was just a case of dropping off resumes at the airport when I needed some money, and I got hired probably the week after, and the rest is history with the
And
airlines.
thankfully you retired before all this happened, and so that worked out
Yes,
really
I
well.
did.
B worked as a nurse,
And still do,
still do.
right?
Okay.
And have been at one of the hospitals here for 39 years.
Well, all of your medical background certainly came in handy. You dealt with breast cancer. You're dealing with heart issues and everything. So, again, another story. But what we wanted to focus on was adoption. And so the two of you are sort of going through life, if I understand correctly, but going through life, a lot of things going on, doing things for the church, doing things at work. And the decision to have kids was,
We really didn't feel like God was leading us to that. We, like you said, we did a lot of ministry, music ministries, and it didn't feel like God was calling us. And then about 2005, you want to tell?
Sure,
what
we were on
doing?
our way to Lakeland to Carpenter's Church to hear Stephen Curtis Chapman in concert. Bea was driving. I was reading to her from Max Lucado's Come Thirsty. Oh. At one point in the book, he hints toward adoption, where he went to Ephesians, and it says, "In love, he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure." So, you know, he made us for the pleasure of loving him. And we just kind of looked at each other when the word adoption came up, and then we continued on. I continued reading. We go to the concert, and he hits us full force with this adoption presentation. Wow. And that was the deciding factor right there. I said that I wanted to support people for adoption, and she said she wanted to adopt, and I said, well, okay. So it wasn't like until next week we started the groundwork for adopting.
So you went through Bethany House? Was that where you first started?
Bethany Christian Services.
Sorry, Bethany Christian Services.
That's okay.
Yeah, so you went through them. They're local.
Yes,
Right? Over here in
Winter Garden.
Winter Garden.
And they began the process with you. Now, did you say to them, we wanted international? Did you have any sort of specifics that you were looking for?
We did. We had really felt for the Chinese children, and Stephen Curtis had presented about the Chinese little girls and that they are given up for adoption just because of the one-child policy, and our hearts were touched there, and we told Bethany Christian Services we wanted to go to adopt a Chinese girl, and that we had prayed about special needs. We had been married 25 years at that point, and we felt like we had a lot to give to a child, and God blessed us with Joanna May.
So when you were, the whole process, you have to go to China and to see her, or did you just go to pick her up?
The China adoption is a long paper process at the beginning,
Right.
and then the matching is done in China, and then you are given some paperwork and you go over to China, and it takes about 10 days in China, and then when your child comes home with you, they are an American citizen.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Along the way, too, we were given the choice of about maybe 20 children, and they sent us a write-up about them. And one of them was a girl who had the syndactyly and extradactyly toe and finger issues. And I said to Bea, this kid has got the same thing that my aunt had.
Oh, really?
And she eventually went on to be a secretary, and she wore these great big rings on these incomplete fingers, just because she was that tough. It's like, don't even mess with me.
Yeah.
And so we prayed specifically that we would get Joanna May for our daughter. We let them
In
know.
the matching.
We let them know
Yeah.
that, hey, this is the right match here. And sure enough, it was. And it was just like a thank you, Jesus moment when I found out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you adopted her, she was how old?
She was 21 months. 21 months.
Yeah. And now she is
Now she is 13.
a teenager.
She is.
And so this was a time of your life where, most people wind down, right? They start bringing the plane in, right? And thinking about where we're going to taxi and sort of park here for the rest of my life. But you just decided, well, we're just getting started.
This is something we've told many people that God laid on our hearts. It's not something that we planned and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I think when we're open to God and we say, God, take my life, and we really listen, then God brings those things into our lives. All we have to do is say yes.
So this is the beautiful verse that you spoke about adoption, and this really sort of typifies what our relationship with Christ is like. We're sinful, we're damaged, but yet he looks at us and says that he loves us. And even though we may have been rejected and in the system in some way, here he comes and says, I want you as my son, I want you as my daughter. And you did that in a literal way with Joanna May, but it really is the story of what God has done for all of us.
That is so beautifully put. You're absolutely right. We're all damaged, and he loves us. He sees Jesus when he sees us.
And even though some may have seen Joanna May and said she was not perfect, you saw her as perfect.
Absolutely.
And God sees us now, and he sees us as perfect when we have Christ. And so it's a great story. And I know, you're a wonderful representative for adoption, for people that have done it, that's made a difference in your life.
Absolutely.
Even through everything that you've been through, you had her there during all of that, through your cancer, through your heart issues. Some people would say, well, it probably wasn't the best time to bring her into all of that, but that's part of her story that she's going to sit here someday and tell.
Right.
And about how God really grew her and matured her through all of that. So thank you for doing that, speaking about adoption. And they can get through, do you know the contact for Bethany Christian Services?
I can
It's
look it
online.
up real quick while you
that's fine.
finish
We'll
up.
we don't have that much time. Just tell people to look up Bethany Christian Services.
Yes.
They're here
Winter Garden.
in Winter Garden. Call the offices. We can get you in touch with them. And maybe this is your path. Maybe this is your Stephen Curtis Chapman moment that they had at going to the concert and realizing that this is something that you need to do in your life. Thank you for being here. We hope these stories have impacted you. You have a story too. Be ready to tell it at some time to someone who needs to hear it, because you never know how it can impact and change someone's lives. And join us on Friday. We'll be here also at 7 o'clock with our worship and as we continue to go through the book of Psalms. Thanks for being here. Now go be the church.